Annually, approximately 500 billion plastic bags are used worldwide. In other words, by the time the Preview of Tomorrow intro finishes playing, more than a million plastic bags will have been used around the world. Of course, listeners of this show know by now that plastic is a severe threat to the environment, not only because of the irresponsible way we dispose of it, but also because it lasts more than 1,000 years in our environment. Now, with such a long lifespan, it's actually shameful to say that on average, a plastic bag's actual work life is only about 15 minutes. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Preview of Tomorrow. I am your host, Mike Lake, and today we delve into a bold new alternative to plastic packaging as I talk with Robert Luo about his company, Mi Terro, and the unique way it is eliminating the use of plastic packaging as we know it.
Innovation, resiliency, discovery. Join Mike Lake, President and CEO of Leading Cities, as we explore the technologies shaping the possibilities of our future with a preview of tomorrow.
Hello and welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us today. And once again, I do want to welcome all of our listeners and viewers. It's really my pleasure today to introduce you to Robert Luo, the CEO of Mi Terro, the world's first advanced material company that partners with food companies and farmers to create home compostable, single-use plastic alternative packaging materials made from plant-based agricultural waste. So we're going to get into what all that means in just a moment. But Robert, let's start by hearing a little bit about yourself and what got you on this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Mike. It's very exciting to be on the podcast. So in 2018, I was very fortunate to visit my uncle's dairy farm in China. And that was when I was first exposed and witnessed the milk waste that he had on his farm. Those milk was supposed to be sold to bigger ranches, bigger dairy producers. But those dairy producers had been building their own ranches. So they're now working with smaller farmers like my uncle. So he had nowhere to sell off the milk, and those were left out to become milk waste. Initially, I want to help him to solve this problem by creating more value from the milk waste instead of going to landfill. And that was when we first started experimenting with the protein instead of milk, which was initially created into textile fiber, like the t-shirt I'm currently wearing right now. Later on, fast forward to 2020, we were very fortunate to connect with Budweiser in China after attending Accelerator in Shanghai. And after learning about their problem with the spent grain that they have, which is also known as beer waste, we realized that the technology that we apply to milk waste can also apply to spent grain because spent grain has protein. So we then start collaborating with them, and now we're creating the world's first packaging material made from spent grain.
That's amazing. I mean, to take a simple problem like agricultural waste, or in this case, dairy waste, and turning it into something that's tackling actually a much bigger problem. I mean, to be able to replace plastics with this kind of organic material, or organic based material, it has a huge impact. I mean, we've talked a lot on this podcast and just in society in general about the fact that there's so much plastic in our oceans, the fact that there's projections that in the not too distant future we'll have more plastic than fish in the oceans, that every piece of plastic ever created by humans is still on the planet. I mean, these are huge challenges that we're contributing to every day. Every one of us is extending this problem into the future, making it an issue for future generations. So tell me a little bit more about the problem as a whole, not just both, I should say, both about the agricultural waste, but also about why plastics, why replace plastics?
Absolutely. So we all use single-use plastic in our lifetime every single day. Think of the cling wrap, the food wrap that we use at home. Around the world, 78 million tons of these wrap are being produced every single year to protect our food from going to waste. Ironically, 30% of the food around the globe still goes to waste. And these two global problems accumulate for more than 30% of the world's total carbon emission. So it's a huge, those are two, in my opinion, two of the biggest and most urgent problems we need to solve. So at Mi Terro, those are the two main problems we want to solve with our technology.
And when we think about it a little bit further and dive a little bit deeper, I know the amount of plastic we're talking about, but I want to put it in perspective a little bit for our listeners. Just every year, the amount of plastic that enters the ocean is, well, by 2040 is expected to hit 29 million metric tons, which, putting it into perspective, is roughly the equivalent of 241 Washington monuments. I mean, we're talking about a tremendous amount of plastic, not all of which could even be extracted from the ocean. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's really difficult, nearly impossible to extract microplastic once it goes in the ocean, in our water stream, or in our soil.
I will say this, that I was shocked to learn that on a weekly basis, we consume about a credit card's worth of microplastics. And I looked into a little bit further, and over the average lifespan, we consume about 40 pounds worth of microplastic each person. I mean, this is bringing up a whole host of questions, none of which we're going to get into today. But what does that do to the human digestive system? Or is this responsible for the increase in allergies we're seeing in our body's inability to respond properly? I mean, the point here is that the health implications of all of this is astronomical as well, not just the environmental implications.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely, 100% agree with you that this can be a detrimental and long-lasting health problem for humanity. And this will take years for these symptoms to even show up. So we have to be very careful of what we do with plastic. Just think about plastic made from fossil fuel. We're literally consuming fossil fuel when we are using plastic. So it's a very tricky and detrimental effect at the end of the day for all of us.
When I think about Mi Terro and the work you're doing, which I do want to get into that right now, but I mean, it really does have such a ripple effect. I mean, it starts at the farm and is now partnering with organizations like Budweiser at the distilleries or whatever. But it spans to health, to the oceans, to the environment at large, to the planet at large. I mean, it really is an incredible ripple effect that you're creating. So with that being said, tell us a little bit more about this technology you've developed. It's so exciting.
Sure, happy to share more. So currently we're working with Budweiser to upcycle their spent grain. And what you can see here is the spent grain that we got from Budweiser. We then extract protein from the spent grain. This is the protein. And through
it's just basically a white powder, is that right?
Right, it's a white powder. And once we remodify this spent grain to make it into flexible packaging material, which you can see right here. This packaging material is made from spent grain. As you can see, it's very durable. Wow. We can also make it more transparent like this. It's also made from spent grain. So there are two different colors. Some customer like this color better, and others like these. And then at the end, our material can be made into bags because it can heat seal like this. You see, this is a tiny heat sealable patchet which can be made into bag that we have created. And currently we're
vacuum seal it as well.
Absolutely. You can also print words on it. It's also home compostable and ocean degradable, which makes it harmless to our environment, even to the marine animal. So currently, we're actually working with McDonald's to create packaging material of their takeout boxes, takeout bags from our material. So we're looking to do some testing plants with them later this year.
So, given that and this might sound like an ignorant question, so forgive me, but given that its base components are organic in nature, when you talked about it not being harmful to marine animals, is it quote edible? I mean, not that I'm suggesting
Well,
that you and I would start eating the packaging material that our to-go box is made of, but what I'm suggesting is if it were consumed, what you're saying is it's essentially harmless.
yes, it's potentially edible, but we do not recommend people to eat it because you don't know what type of germ or microorganism that has contact the packaging material. Even though
Sure.
it's safe for animals to consume, we don't recommend humans to consume it.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. And just a clear distinction on something. When you say something is home compostable,
Mhm.
what exactly does that mean versus, being tossed out as organic waste?
Great question. So what we're talking about home compostable, it only means if you bury it in your backyard, in the soil, it will break down into water, biomass, and carbon dioxide normally within 180 days.
Wow. So within 6 months, it's gone.
Correct. Correct.
Now, let me ask you another question. If you were to create your own compost at home, given the breakdown that you're talking about, I mean, how good of a fertilizer is it that you're creating?
That is something we're still testing on the effect of becoming a fertilizer, the nutrient to soil. But from our current in-house testing, it can be applied and reused as fertilizer. But we're still having more data that will come out later on to validate the point.
Okay. So just give me another sense in the process that Mi Terro undertakes. So starting with, you mentioned Budweiser, you partner with organizations like this, whether it's a large, in this case, a beer manufacturer or farmers. Is that who do you start the process with? I guess is the question.
Mhm. So initially, we start with food companies that own factories, so we can source them at a bigger scale. But we do want to work with smaller farmers or farmer at mid scale that also see a value that our technology can help them generate more revenue from the waste that they have generated on the farm. So essentially, our goal is to partner not only with big companies, but also with smaller, medium-sized farmers.
I have to admit, I was talking to somebody recently about Mi Terro, and she was explaining that growing up, her family owned a dairy farm, and how shocking it was, sometimes how much of the dairy had to just be, wasted. And not only was that a serious economic threat to the farm and to the family, of course, um, but I mean, it's just such a waste. So to be able to, number one, prevent the waste, and number two, as you point out, create a revenue stream, which could be the economic lifeline that a small farm in particular might need to stay afloat.
Correct, correct. I think farming community is one of the most underrepresented, underserved community. And we definitely want to create more value from them, for them to understand that their crops, their waste can generate much more value than what they have been. And these can be turned to high-end material, high technology materials that can in return replace single-use plastic. So they'll be proud one day to say that, hey, the agricultural waste that they generated is helping our world.
So when we talk about agricultural waste, are there any limitations that you're aware of on what may or may not be able to kind of be the starting process for Mi Terro?
So essentially, any type of agricultural waste or food waste that has protein can be utilized through our technology. but we have to be very careful on what type of food waste or ag waste we want to use because of the quantity, because of the cost of sourcing those material can be tremendous if the logistic does not work out.
And the process itself, I don't want to get into trade secrets here. But once you have sourced that material, that initial material, uh, do you have your own manufacturing facility? Is that where it would go?
Yes, we are going to build our manufacturing facility that does the extraction of protein, remodifying protein, creating pellets that can directly apply to existing plastic manufacturing machines, and later on creating the final film.
So is it possible that the pellet production piece could be done on a smaller scale and more localized scale to reduce the logistics of transporting the ag waste?
You're absolutely right. That's why we are going to build pilot plants near the raw material supplier's facility.
Got it. And then you're shipping the pellets to actually continue the process by transforming that into the alternative plastic materials. Is that right?
Yes.
Got it. Well, this is really fascinating. I mean, when you talk about impact, when you talk about opportunity as well, it's not just addressing a problem or a single problem, it's addressing so many different issues and creating, as you point out, new revenue streams for particularly independent farmers that, any source of additional revenue, especially in the light of otherwise wasting all that effort and material, would be a huge value add. Listen, Robert, I want to just take just a moment. Our time has quickly run out here, but looking forward, into the future, what does it mean for an individual or for the planet as a whole to have Mi Terro be the alternative to plastic as we know it, or plastic packaging materials as we know it?
We want Mi Terro to be an inspiration for a generation of innovators, green innovators, to come up with a solution not only does good for the planet, but also come at a cost that normal consumers are willing to pay, clients are willing to pay. And we don't want to be the only player in the industry to think about how can we replace single-use plastic with innovative solution, and at the same time reducing food waste. So if anyone wants to work with us, we're more than happy to collaborate, to share our idea, our expertise, and to help each other accelerate.
Well, on that note, how might somebody get in contact with you or learn more?
You can follow us on Instagram, on LinkedIn. They all both Mi Terro, Miterro. When you search, you can find us. You can also send us an email at hello@miterro.com.
And then it was Miterro. That's great. Well, listen, Robert, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Preview of Tomorrow. It truly is an inspiration to learn more about what you've created and the impact you're having already. I thank you for your time and for all of the effort you've put into this truly innovative and transformative solution.
Thank you so much, Michael, for having me.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Preview of Tomorrow. Listeners like you are essential to advancing our efforts to drive resiliency and sustainability for all. I ask that you give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whichever streaming platform you prefer. Your feedback helps us to grow and share these brief previews of what life in the future can be. In addition to thanking our guest today, I want to thank Peter Roy and Demetria Bridges for making this podcast possible. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and encourage others to also join us each week in previewing the possibilities of tomorrow.
Preview of Tomorrow is brought to you by Leading Cities, a global nonprofit driving resilience and sustainability for all by unleashing the potential of the world's cities. Join them at leadingcities.org.